This podcast is brought to you by Tethered. If you're looking for an elevated hunting system that is light, mobile, customizable with MOLLE attachment systems, and above all else is extremely safe, then you need to check out the Tethered Mantis saddle and the Predator platform. I took the plunge last year and have been using both the Mantis saddle and the Predator platform and haven't looked back since. What I love about the Mantis saddle is how lightweight it is, and also its versatility in terms of adding different cis haulers and so forth to the saddle to help me kind of carry any type of climbing aiders or tethers or lineman ropes. I'm basically able to walk in if I really wanted to with just my saddle and my platform and of course my bow, and I'm ready to hunt. So super light, super mobile. The Predator platform is just, for me, was the most comfortable way, and especially for anyone out there who might be new to saddle hunting, it was probably the most familiar way for me to get into saddle hunting, as it's a smaller platform. So just kind of imagine a smaller version of a hang-on tree stand. Which gave me that little bit of familiarity that I was looking for as I made the transition from tree stand to saddle hunting. And now I can't believe that it took me this long to actually get into saddle hunting. So if you think being more mobile or lighter will help you in the deer woods, head over to tetherednation.com, check them out, and learn more about all their products. This podcast is also brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. If you dig coffee and you dig conservation, you'll want to check out Skull Brew Coffee at skullbrewcoffee.com. We also recently just launched an Ethiopia Harar light roast, which is primo for cold brew. So you might want to check that out given the record-setting temps that we have. So avoid the hot coffee, rock the cold brew with Skull Brew Coffee. Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 130. Today, John and I are talking optics with Mike Lilligren of Maven Optics, so stay tuned. All right. What is going on, everyone? Hope you're all having a good time out there. Happy Wednesday to you. We're another week closer to whitetail season. It's been crazy hot lately, so I'm not sure how many of you out there braved the freakish temperatures to do whitetail work. Those of you that did, hats off to you. Those of you that didn't, like me, I assume you stayed in a cool place or in a body of water somewhere to combat the heat. I actually had plans to go out and hang one more trail camera with my buddy Tom Titlow, which he wussed out on me, and I was all ready to go to hang these cameras in this piece of in this chunk of timber. But I'm just kidding. We both kind of wussed out. I'm just talking smack on him. If he's listening to this, I'm sure I'll get a text message. But nothing too crazy happened. Of course, it's the week back from vacation, so I really just kind of dove into work and was grinding through that. Still making my way through the book that I've been reading, and started just doing a little bit of from the last camera pull that I did, starting to do a little inventorying of my trail camera pictures. In the past, I've used some tools and stuff to kind of help me out. This year, because I have so many parcels that I'm working with, 6 if I'm not counting, any of the private pieces back home on any of our family properties, and it's just a lot to keep track of. So this year, I've used it in the past, but I'm actually using Deer Lab this year to keep track of everything. So I started loading, my pictures into the Deer Lab platform, so I could start to tag them and keep track of what bucks I, am considering shooters, and figuring out, what wind directions they're liking to use, what time they're traveling. It's really cool technology if you've not checked it out. I've used it, I guess I used it roughly 3-ish years ago, and every year since I've kind of played around with it. Didn't have a full need necessarily for it in the past, because I really just didn't have enough parcels to keep track of. But this year, with the amount of property that I'm going to be hunting, I needed something to kind of help keep me sane and keep me on track and making sure I'm making the right moves. Just adding some additional data points. If you've never played with it, it does stuff like heat mapping and stuff like that. Will show you, how frequently certain deer are showing up at certain places, wind direction, barometric pressure for a given deer. It's pretty impressive and all encompassing, and I do enjoy using it to try to keep my bearings about me. Because just being completely transparent and honest, the old memory is not what it once was. So it sometimes fails me, and I'll forget. If there's a deer that had been coming through at a certain time, I might be off by a half hour or an hour. If I might have the wrong wind direction in mind, and so forth. So this kind of is a nice way for me to do a quick check, to make sure that I'm keeping everything in order and crossing my T's and dotting my I's. I also went out this weekend. I did go out and brave the heat on Saturday and did a little shooting. It was good to get out and shoot some long distances. Went out super early. It was ridiculously hot. I think we were in the timber, so we were in the shade, but it was still getting close to 90-ish degrees in the morning. I think we started shooting around 7:30 and wrapped up by 10:30. But I did that with my buddy, of course, the bow hunting fiend, and then my buddy Wilson joined us as well. And then we actually have a couple new podcasts that'll be coming out. Some of the DIY Report mini series, the look back series that we've been doing. So Greg and Wilson and I recorded a few more of those, so you'll have those that will be forthcoming in the not so distant future. But I'm not going to belabor this up front a whole lot here. Have a cool show today. We have Mike Lilligren on from Maven Optics. So Mike is, of course, John is pretty familiar with Mike and friends with Mike, has known him for a little while. John does some work with Maven as well. John, of course, uses Maven Optics, and so and my buddy Chad Sylvester uses them as well. And so I've had a chance to use their glass periodically, and I have what I've mentioned on the show here. I have that Western hunt, not this fall, but next fall that's coming up. And in the past, when I went west, I was hunting with a buddy of mine who, he lives in Montana and he has all the requisite gear to go out and do elk and mule deer hunts and so forth. And so whenever I was getting all my supplies that particular year, he recommended to me, he was like, hey, listen, you don't need to get a spotting scope or anything. I'm going to, I've got that covered. It's not something you need to pick up. So I didn't. So now, fast forward to next year, my dad and I are headed out west together. He doesn't have a spotting scope. I, of course, don't either. And so I'm kind of been looking around now preemptively before, that way I'm not making last minute decisions and trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to do from a spotting scope perspective. Also, just in the sense of, the binos I have and so forth, what really wanted to understand glass better and how, I guess, in what use cases certain types of features are most desirable, I guess is one way to put it. And I'll be the first to admit I don't know a whole lot about glass. I kind of look through it. I'm like, yep, I can see closer. I can see something from 300 yards or 400 yards away. It looks like it's closer. Seems like it's working to me. But there's a whole lot more that goes into it, and I wanted to get smart on it. That way I understood whenever I was starting to dive into this world and picking what I was going to be purchasing next, that I would have a better idea of what I was looking for and what the price point differences are. The unique thing about Maven, similar to Exodus, is that they are a direct-to-consumer only company, and so that allows them to kind of put their money back into their products. So whenever you buy their products, you might be paying, whatever the price point is, $300, $400, something like that. But you're getting the quality product of something that if you bought it at retail would probably retail for around $700-800, so almost twice as much. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get Mike Lilligren on. I hope you guys enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you all soon. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today, John and I are joined. Now, we already had a dry run here with this because we had a little technical issue. And by technical issue, I mean I forgot to hit the record button. But we're joined by Mike Lilligren of Maven Optics. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great.
Good, man. Glad to have you. So thanks for making some time to chat chat optics with you. Are you calling in from Wyoming, is it?
I am. I'm sitting in beautiful, sunny Wyoming.
Nice. Yeah. So give me a little, I'm usually envious of folks that live out west, man, because you guys kind of get the good weather this time of year where it's not so humid and ridiculously hot. Although today wasn't too bad. So what's the weather in Wyoming these days?
So it's actually pretty pleasant outside right now. It's about 78 degrees, probably about 10% humidity, which is humid for us. We're thinking, why the heck does it not dry out? But we've had so much moisture this year. It's been crazy. I mean, the snow in the mountains is still about 150% of normal.
Wow.
And but the rivers are flowing strong and the weather's clearing up. Everything's very green. So
nice.
Good weather.
Yeah, I think John got all the precipitation that either of us would need for this year.
I got actually. Well, they just said something. I talked to one of my neighbors. I wasn't here in Iowa for the big flood of '93, and this is like a legitimate thing. They've got the big totem pole that's got the markings on it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They said that we have received more rain this year than any year that they've recorded it. And I think they've been doing it for like 100 years or something like that.
Wow.
Insane. It's been nuts.
Yeah, I keep seeing pictures of people trying to put their food plots in the Midwest, and like they're just basically burying their ATVs in the mud in the middle of a field somewhere, which is
it's insane.
Yeah, I know we had plenty of, but I did. So this is what I'm taking from it. This is the silver lining I'm taking from it. This is probably a complete myth, but I've read somewhere where folks have said out west, and maybe Mike, maybe you might be the guy to talk to about this, but I've heard folks from the West say that in really, really wet years, it seems like the elk pack on more bone in wet years. And so I think people are trying to adopt that here in the Midwest and in the East for whitetails. So I'm going to ask you to be the myth buster here. Do you notice if it's a wet year, if the elk actually pack on more bone every year, those years?
So, I mean, I am probably not the best one to ask, and only because I am a relatively, by any Wyoming standards, a relatively new hunter.
Right.
And what I mean by that is I've only been hunting for about 20 years.
Right.
And so I am a remarkably unsuccessful elk hunter. So what I mean by that is I've killed one elk.
Right.
So and now I've been hunting for 20 years, and really only 10 of those were elk hunting years.
Right.
But still, one elk and 10. So what I say is I don't have enough evidence to give you firsthand information. Now,
right.
Of course, all of the people who are tuned into this podcast just tuned out. They're like, why would I listen to an optics guy that has such crappy elk hunting, record? But what I can tell you is I talked to a lot of game and fish people. I talked to a lot of other hunters, and moisture is the number one driver of the size of the animals, the mass of the animals that people are pulling out, plus the overall success that people are seeing overall. So you're talking about packing more bone. You're probably talking. I assume you mean antlers,
right?
This is a term that but yeah, the overall health of the animals of the herd is stronger. So we're going to see more large bulls during these moist years. They're more successful, so we have a lower death rate, so they're more healthy. Now, the number two driver, though, is our spring weather, because we can get some horrendous spring weather that can kill off a lot of animals. But this year we haven't had that. So this year we've got a ton of good moisture. We had a really mild spring. Not a lot of late season storms that were horrendous. So yeah, it's my I'm going to say, even though I did not draw the tag that I put in for it, and there's a lot of angry people in this office for this, we had a kind of a group tag in a nice area out of here. I'm going to say it's going to be a banner year for elk hunting in Wyoming. We're going to pull out some big animals, even though we're hunting general.
Nice. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
So what you're saying is it's basically a bummer that I didn't plan to come out west this year, essentially.
Right. Well, the problem is it's a lot harder for out of state draws anyway.
Yeah.
Your applications are due in January.
Yeah. And
so you have to make a call way early, but yeah, it was probably a huge mistake. Yeah, I'm sure the big bull that was just waiting out here for you that you would have guaranteed draw is going to go to someone else.
Exactly. I can't complain too much though, because I did draw an Iowa tag, and we'll be hunting with Johnny Utah here in November. Yeah, so I'm looking pretty.
That's fantastic.
I'm looking forward to that, so that'll be cool. But without further delay, we've been talking here for a little while, and you work, of course, you're with Maven Optics. But I want to get a little bit of background about you. So if you wouldn't mind, as we get started here, just give me a little bit of background about yourself, what you do professionally, where you're from, and then, what you've been doing, in the hunting world.
Sure. So I grew up as an Army brat, traveling all around the world, and settled into South Dakota and then found my way to Wyoming. I always say I'm not from Wyoming, but I got here as fast as I could. I moved here in 1995, oddly enough, because I was a semi-professional rock climber, and the town I live in is a big rock climbing town. But interestingly enough, because I did a lot of expedition rock climbing, I had a lot of experience with outdoor products. I worked sometime in retail and got a job with an outdoor company in 2000, being a product manager. And with that company, I started I grew up as a shooter. Both my parents are NRA instructors, and we killed a lot of paper, but never hunted. Oddly enough, growing up, even in South Dakota, where the bird hunting's fantastic,
right?
The deer hunting's awesome. I just never did any of it, which is strange. But got into the outdoor industry and started hunting, and really just fell in love with it. So primarily antelope. Started chasing elk around in 2000, and then also went out, shot birds, and about anything else that I could get my hands on. A license for, would get out and try my hand at it. Turkey, I love turkey hunting. So as I was kind of a troublemaker in a product. I started out product management of more camping gear, but I had big mouth and it was relatively organized. So I became a director of product development for this company. That company, Brunton, and traveled around the world developing a lot of products, including their optics line. And I met two guys while I was working there. One was the head of design and creative and marketing, named Brendan Weaver. Another guy was in charge of logistics and sourcing, and his name was Cade Mastis. And Cade and Brendan and I became friends. Brunton went through a series of buyouts where they were, you see it all over the outdoor industry, where a big corporation buys a small company and then they take it in some unknown new direction. And we weren't happy with where that was going. It was the company was doing okay, and we were doing well within the company and making good livings, but it just wasn't what we believed in. And we also we started kind of commiserating, sitting around a campfire, drinking beer, talking about how we would do it if because we're bigger and smarter than everybody else, right? So if they just listened to us, everything would be okay. And so we realized that we had some vision for some new ideas. And so in 2008, just absolutely perfect timing, we split off and decided to start a company, our own independent company. And of course, everybody knows what happened to the economy then. It was a heck of a roller coaster, but Brendan and Cade and I have been riding it strong together since 2008. So it's been a heck of a ride. The first company we started was not Maven. We started a company that developed private label products for people.
Okay.
So what that means is like a duffel bag or a tent or a fly rod or whatever that your little store, say Joe's outdoor store, would have Joe's logo on it, right?
Right.
And it was a pretty cool, very successful, but difficult to finance. And I transitioned in this team to being the finance guy. And so we started kind of seeking investors and reevaluating our priorities, and realized what we really wanted to do is launch a brand. And so we saw what was happening in the optics market. We had some really strong relationships. And we decided to start Maven in 2013. So we're actually 2 days from our 6th anniversary of this company. Yeah. And it's been going fantastic. And we made a couple of big decisions. One of them was to sell only direct. And that was a huge difference between us and all of the other, it's a pretty diverse field out there of optics companies, but we decided to sell direct, and we decided to work to assemble in the U.S. and make custom products for people. Nice. And those two things have kind of driven the business along. And yeah, well, that's a lot of information in a short period of time there.
No, that's great. You kind of covered the how Maven was started. You guys had a relationship previously, right? So two-part question here. And John, I don't know if you have anything to add in on this, but it's just, businesses that started around that time of the economic downturn just like struggled mightily. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and a lot of them didn't make it out, especially as like small businesses, right? That's like the kiss of death. Like you have a 50% chance of failure just by being a small business in general. then
just get out of the gate.
Yeah, out of the gate, you're already kind of doomed. And then layer on it that you guys had that economic issue to deal with. So one, how did you kind of manage your way through that? And then two, why specifically was Maven started? Like, what was the precipice for it? Like, what was the mission or the battle cry? And John, I don't know if you have anything else to kind of layer onto that.
Yeah. After Mike answers that, then I've got some follow up as well.
Cool. Yeah. So, I've already lost your first question.
Oh, so
how
that's
do
okay.
We navigate that? No, how do we navigate that? So it's a long road, and it was interesting because after starting starting in 2008, going strong for a couple of years, but realizing that we were fighting against exactly those things you talk about. The issue when you have a small business, there's a lot of things to keep your eyes on, and the number one thing is cash. Mm-hmm. It's easy to, well, it's not easy, but it's possible to have a good idea and make some good product. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty reasonable if you make a good product to sell it to somebody. Right. And especially when you're selling to stores, if you have some relationships out there, you can carve your way out on that. The problem is cash. The problem is buying that product and selling that product doesn't happen at the same time.
Right.
And so we struggled with that. And then, of course, it was an economic downturn. So we were working very hard to make these sales. Mm-hmm. The way we got out of it, honestly, was it comes back to, and it actually ties exactly to what you talk about, our main kind of battle cry. Right. It comes back to relationships. We realized that the number one, I'll answer the second question, I'll kind of back into it. The number one thing is we just refuse to work with jerks. Yeah. I've used a lot of different terms. I don't know how strong a term I want to use on this podcast, but
you're free to use them as strongly as you would like to at your own peril.
We refuse to work with douchebags.
Yeah, there you go.
That's the term we typically, we just refuse to do it. And as a result, we end up working with people that we really build a strong relationship with. Mm-hmm. And so we built a strong relationship with a local bank that helped us through a lot of things. And we built a strong relationship with an investor that helped us kind of solidify our vision for Maven. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the initial things is we absolutely refused to work with people we didn't want to work with. And then this kind of the second battle cry was, that we refuse to make products that we can't be proud of. We have to be proud of our product. And so those two things kind of were the foundation. The other piece of it for us is we love where we live. And we want to live in Wyoming, and we want to build something that we can be proud of, but that's based here in our little town in Wyoming. And that's the beauty of this day and age is you can do that. So that's how we navigated through the hurdles. We found ways to bridge that financial thing, and then at the same time, those are the founding principles of how we kicked into Maven. And I think that the third piece, the third kind of founding pillar of Maven is that direct-to-consumer pillar I mentioned earlier. Yep. And that means building a relationship with our customer. Yep. And that relationship is helping to build our success, because we're making good product, we're offering them as a good value, we're building a relationship with our customers. That also builds towards the future. Like these people are now proud of our product. They're telling their friends, and they're telling us. They're telling us what we could do. What's next? Right. They're telling us, what they're the key to our future.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. John, did you have a follow up there?
Well, it's going back to when Mike was telling his story. I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm going, man, this is just all so familiar. About having a brand and seeing it sold off and then see it basically go to shit. I recently went through that, with Wicked.
Right.
Right. Nonetheless. Yeah. And it's funny, hearing your perspective on it, because there's not a lot of people that have been through that, where it's the early stages. Cash flow is everything, and you have to order product, and you have to have it in your stock in your warehouse to sell before it actually gets sold. So you're trying to not cash flow yourself out, and you're okay. If I get 100 units, hopefully by the time we sell half of those units, then we've recouped some cash flow, and then we can order another 100 units, or maybe I'm using 100, but I remember the early days of Wicked, and I mean, it was literally like we'd order 100 handsaws, and then we'd order 250 handsaws. And then, towards the end, we were placing orders for, 20,000 handsaws at a time. But, it's funny how you have to watch your cash. That was always the most important thing. And you feel like you're living on the edge. But, the direct to consumer approach, it's becoming more and more popular. But when you guys started doing that 6 years ago, nobody was doing that.
Right. Really, literally, everybody was talking about KUIU at that time. They just kicked out the door. And in the outdoor space, that was it.
Right.
That was it. There was nobody else. And nobody knew if that would be successful or not. There were some, in the other space, like in glasses and in some other things, you saw it more frequently. But not in the outdoor industry.
Well, and I've always said that the outdoor industry is behind the times. Automotive is always exactly. Automotive has always been ahead of the outdoor industry. And there's times that, I would look at the automotive industry and it's kind of, I'm not saying I want to copy what they're doing, but it would kind of forecast like what's about to come, so to speak.
Yeah.
And do you think your background and some of the other product stuff that you were working on before Maven and Brunton, that is kind of what placed that mindset with you guys? Like, hey, let's give this direct to consumer, or was it from a position of cash flow where we can be smaller as we navigate our way through our growth?
Well, that's really astute. And I think the cash flow piece, so it was our direct-to-consumer, our decision to go that way was based on a rejection of our past. And so, we weren't necessarily embracing something that was new as much, although we were, but as we were more trying to get away from the constraints that we had in previous companies and what we saw in the industry. The cash flow piece, I wish I was brilliant enough to say that's the reason we went in a direct-to-consumer path. It is better. Like the way that a direct-to-consumer business works, you get paid for the product, and then you give it to someone. Or you're getting paid at the time you're handing it to someone. And that is so much better for if you can manage your inventory, you can do a better job of cash flow. And that was a good thing.
Well, and just for the listeners, just to kind of shed some information from the business side of outdoor industry products, as a general rule, there are a few categories that don't follow this, but as a general rule, if a big box store is buying your product, they're going to buy it from you at a 50% discount of whatever your retail price is. As a general rule, manufacturers want to make at least 50 points on said product. So for sake of easy numbers, let's say you have a $100 item in a store, a box store paid $50 for it, and the manufacturer has $25 in it. That's the general, that's your cookie cutter numbers, the way the outdoor industry product side works. So that being said, if I'm following that general traditional method and I've got a product that I've got $25 in and I sell it to a box store, that box store is also going to take the product and they're going to pay me net 60.
Right.
So you've got all your skin in the game. You had to pay for the product, get it shipped to you. A lot of times with manufacturing, you're putting at least 50% down, paid at time of shipment. You receive it, you send it to the box store. They've now got your product. They're going to pay you in 60 days. So you're already looking 90, maybe even 120 days. Best case scenario.
Right.
So, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And, Mike, one of the first conversations you and I had, I was drawn to you guys on the direct to consumer, and then your product backed it up. And because I look at a set of Maven binos, we were at Montana Tech, and I walked up to the booth, and I was like, oh my God, these things are great. And I know my personal feeling with direct to consumer is I'm actually getting more bang for my buck, because there's no middleman to step on it. And me being former undercover, I like to use, stepping on stuff like stepping on drugs, but nobody has stepped on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm getting the purest form.
You've captured exactly. I mean, that's the story that we spend. It's funny. We spend about, I would say, half of our time explaining to people what direct to consumer is and why it works for the customer. Mm-hmm. And then half of our time actually talking about our product.
Right.
And we always find that kind of frustrating because, we want to talk about product, and we try to stay away from the word value, because that's not really what it's about. I mean, yes, it's a value. You're getting a better product for a better price, but it's real that we kind of wanted that to be a given in this day and age. But you've also captured another piece of it, John, that a lot of people don't see. The direct-to-consumer has two other advantages besides the better price, and that is that you're going to end up with a more intimate relationship with your company as a customer, and the second is it's a much more sustainable business model because of cash, and so it's a much easier to manage business model. What it isn't is a fast growth business model. So from a entrepreneur standpoint, and I often get asked to talk about being an entrepreneur, which I don't really consider myself, but it is, we all want to get rich. Like, you know what I mean? We want to have the idea that blows up, and a direct to consumer business is not that. And you've got to kind of check your ego a little bit on that. It's like we bust our asses to sell a pair of binoculars. Like, we talk and every time we talk on the phone, talk on email, we sell one pair of binoculars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean?
I think the one thing that's interesting about that is just, there's a couple, and John knows all these guys too. It's you look at a couple companies that I specifically, know. I know you now, right? So Maven, who is direct to consumer in the glass world, and then there's the guys like our friends, from Exodus, Chad Sylvester, and those guys who we're good buddies with that are also direct to consumer. And then I have my buddies who run and own Tethered, the saddle company, which is all direct to consumer. And the one thing that I will say is that with all those products, you are getting the top notch quality of product. The other thing you're also getting is, and I think this sometimes is underrated, is the community of people who use those products, who are kind of helping kind of re-instill and push forward the brand narrative from a marketing perspective, because they are all in, because they've likely met you at a show. They likely know someone who is on your staff who really believe, either your pro staff or your someone who's sponsored or whatever, who has a really, in-depth knowledge of the brand and the products, and kind of, emits that brand. Right. And so there's this halo effect that happens because of the direct to consumer approach that you can't get with Primos or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, they're selling on a legacy name, and it's a great legacy name. Not going to discount it, but there's the other approach, which is, we're going to do right by the customer. We're going to do right by the people. We're going to have faces and names to the product, and make sure that the narrative is about the quality of the product, about the performance of the product, and how it fits into the end user's life to enhance their,
Right.
enhance their adventures. And that to me is the biggest difference between direct consumer, not the biggest from a business model perspective, but from a consumer side perspective.
Right.
That's the difference that I see as a consumer.
I think that's fantastic. And because really, we John and I are, we talk about the business perspective, all this, and we keep this in mind, but the end result is really, we care about the customer.
Yep.
And we care about the product. And I'm glad that comes through, because we really do. When we spend time on the phone with the customer, we're really trying to understand what their needs are and understand how that product fits into their needs. And then I think that passes along, that customer passes that care on to his buddy, who is then, so I love that you talk about community. I think that is really what I agree with you 100%. That's one of the great advantages of these direct companies. Is that you're joining a family.
Yeah, I just think as much information is available in the ether these days, right? People have a lot of information to make decisions, and so transparency has to be king, because you're going to be found out if you're not, and
exactly.
I don't know, for the the hardcore, like we'll call them the hardcore hunters, or the super dedicated ones, or however we want to phrase it. Right. I don't know many of them, or I'll just say my circle of friends. Like I don't, none of us have bought something that, and these guys I think they do a good job for the industry, not, discounting what they do, but like, I've never bought anything that Mark or Terry Drury was hawking, or, the man from Booger Bottom, you know what I mean? Like I've never bought anything that they've endorsed, because I'm going like, yeah, they probably use it, maybe, but they're not a guy like me. But whenever I talk to guys that, for example, I've been looking at new boots, for example, and I know John has a specific brand that he really likes and wears and works with. And so I'm like, hey, I know you really like these boots. I respect John as a hunter, and I respect his opinion.
Right.
And so I'm going to ask him, hey, if I have a gear question, it's like, hey man, I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. What do you think? And get his opinion. Right. And that's kind of how I formulate, what products I'm going to look at.
So that person, so John, for you, John, that he is, in your mind, he's a trusted expert about hunting boots.
Yep.
He's someone that you trust. You might consider him for you, he's an influencer, right? A trusted expert. So that person, the name for that type of person is a Maven.
Yeah.
That's where we named our company. It's our ethos is the best way to find great product or great anything. It's not just products, but the best, shortest cut, best way to get the best benefit out of anything is to find someone that you trust, a trusted expert, an influencer. And that's been our feeling from the beginning. And it's where we came up with the name of our company. Is because that's our community. Your community's filled with those trusted experts, those influencers.
Exactly.
So Clint,
and you are one of them.
Well, and from the rest of this podcast, Clint, you are to refer to me as Maven.
As Maven Utah?
Maven Utah.
It sounds like you're a character on Little House on the Prairie or something, dude.
I kind of am a character.
He kind of is.
All right. So I want to switch gears here, because, starting a small business just in general is not an easy task. I think we kind of covered that. But I think even in this day and age in social media, and especially when you're direct to consumer only, and the only way people are able to kind of interact with your products are at shows and so forth, right? I know that's sometimes a challenge because they can't go pick it up, look at it because it's not in a store, right? So that's a hurdle to a degree. But that also kind of spawns, naysayers, right? The haters, if you will, right? And it always happens at the beginning of people's life cycles, because let's just be honest, it's like it's really easy for those who don't try to achieve to cast stones at those who do try. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I'm just curious, when you guys started out, at the beginning, how the naysayers that you did have, how did you begin to win them over or to prove them incorrect in their scoffs at what you were attempting to do?
Right. We ran into different kinds of naysayers. there certainly are, and we still run into them. And we're a new company. I mean, 6 years old is not very old,
right?
And there's a lot. And as John said, that this industry is notoriously behind the times. And where I find one of the ways is our customer, or our consumers, not ours Mavens, but the outdoor industry's customer base is notoriously uninformed. And so we run into people all the time, every day, at every show, and on the phone every day. I guess on the phone they're not saying they never heard of us, because they obviously heard of us enough to call us. Right. But every single show, never heard of you. And so those naysayers naysay in a couple different ways. One of the first is, and is the ones that just takes a while to overcome, is that how do I know you're going to be around in 5 years?
Right.
And that's a legitimate question. We've won, the ones who we have won over, we won over simply by time. And we're going to continue to win those people over as we continue to, push on along. The naysayers I like to deal with are the ones that naysay us about product, because the way we win them over is putting a pair of Mavens in their hands. And that's all it takes.
Right.
You're absolutely right, Clint. It is the number one hurdle with an internet-based only company, is that people can't touch your product. And optics in particular, people want to touch it. They want to feel it. They want to know how it fits in their hands and against their face and how it looks. And so we've won those people over by being at shows. We go to 36 shows a year around this country. We're going to continue to expand that list, not shrink it, because we realize that being in front of people is awesome. So we work with other people to help. I mean, obviously, we can't go to every single show. The three of us can't. The 7 of us here in HQ can't go. But we have friends that have helped us and partners that are helping us go to shows, and so we'll expand that list. But beyond that, we also have a demo program, which is an awesome program to
I saw that, actually.
Get
That's
a pair
super
of
cool.
optics. Yeah, you can get a pair of optics. You can have them for 2 weeks. So, you've been into a store and tried a pair of binos. They look good. You're looking in your bright light. You got lots of detail. It's not very far away. Everything looks good. But where the rubber meets the road on a pair of optics is at 5 o'clock in the morning or at 8:30 at night, depending on your time of day and what time of year. But, it's after the sun's down and before the sun's up that it really makes a difference.
Right.
And that's what's great about a demo program. You can get that out and you can try it in every environment you want. You can go out in the woods and, you can take it on a scouting trip. You can take it to your neighbor's house who has the best pair of binos you've ever seen and try them head to head with his. Right. And so it's a great way to go.
Nice. So I want to shift gears again here. I agree with you. I mean, the challenge is, that's kind of what I heard from, you just kind of reiterated it. It's something that, I've heard Chad and those guys kind of talk about, as far as like the biggest hurdle is like they just need to see it and try it, and like once they try it, and they get a sense of the quality and and I think meeting the people at the shows, it's like you get it, because this, I was pitching a business thing several years ago to some investors. And, this was an older gentleman who gave me some really good advice. He and I went out to dinner, and he basically, first thing he said, and I'll never forget this, I'm waiting one day to when I can use this. He was eating breakfast, and he said he was having bacon and eggs, and he looks at me and says, which animal here gave the most for this breakfast? And I'm like, this is like an SAT question. I'm like, all right, what's the answer to this? I'm sitting here thinking,
okay, come on. Yeah. I know it's a trick question.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it doesn't matter how I answer it, it's going to be wrong, right? And so I said the chicken, right?
Right.
It gave up its unborn children, maybe, or the chicken gave up, the chicken that was literally in the egg itself gave up its life, but
there you go.
Technically unborn, right? So he looks at me, he says, yeah, he's like, the chicken laid the egg, it gave a lot. And he's like, even the chicken that was in the egg gave a lot, but it hadn't manifested itself yet into like being a chicken. He said, the hog gave the most. He's like, it gave its life so I could have this bacon. He said, Clint, I only work with hogs that are willing to lay down their life for the business. He's like, so let me ask you, are you a chicken or are you a pig? And that was, and I was like, I thought it was in like a gangster movie or something, It was It was kind of
You're
funny.
looking around for the cameras.
Yeah.
Like, okay, am I on reality television right now?
Yeah, exactly.
So what did you decide? Are you a chicken or are you a pig?
Well, I told him I was a pig, and then
Of course you did.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, I'm a pig. We ended up getting close to like our seed money that we were looking to raise, and we were a couple $100K short of the final goal. And we had the one investor that we did have that was in on it, wanted me to scale the project back, and he would fully fund it, but I had a number in my head that I wanted to hit, that I thought we would need to have a chance to be successful, and I wasn't willing to do it for anything less than that, because I just thought it was going to be a waste of some folks' time, and I didn't want to waste someone else's money necessarily either. So,
absolutely,
I backed off of it. But the thing I think that in the direct to consumer game, and I've worked booths for Chad and those guys at like outdoor shows and stuff like that. I've done some stuff for Tethered at shows and stuff like that, and I think the biggest thing is that they're betting on a horse. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of what it is. Like in business, it's like you invest in the idea, but like if you have a guy who has a decent idea, but he's just going to get it done because that's his track record, you put money on that guy or that girl, whatever. Right. And so I think it's similar in the direct to consumer world, where it's like, yeah, they can't get their hands tactically on the piece at the ready, but when they do, once they meet the people and they understand the people behind it, they're willing to bet on that horse. And then it's a long-term, it's a long-term commitment. So you're going for the long game versus the short game.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Which, from a customer, once you understand that, and it's amazing to me how few customers do, but they're getting more and more. They understand that answers that number one naysayer question of like, how do I know you're going to be here in 5 years?
Right.
The flash in the pan, want to get rich idea, and that is the one you can't trust.
Right.
It's the one those people who are saying, oh no, I've got this new idea, Cabela's is going to buy 1 million of them, I'm going to be, those are the ones that you should be really suspect of.
Yeah.
But when you look at that slow growth, quality built, low volume, that's the long game. Yeah. That's the company that you can see, oh, look, they didn't launch 55 rifle scopes right out of the gate.
Right.
Because that's just not sustainable. You can see that in a company, like they focus on a product. They aren't making a lot of different products. They're slow growth, and that's that long game. But that's a lot to expect a customer to understand.
It is.
So I get that it takes a while.
Right. And there's a lot of different ways to communicate that, whether it's in your value proposition, whether it's in your mission, the company mission, whether it's in, your reasons to believe in your products or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can, communicate that, and everyone kind of digests it and interprets it differently. So you kind of have to do it in a bunch of different avenues. But I want to talk to you a little bit about knowing that, the customer is kind of at the center of everything you guys do from a direct to consumer perspective. And so I'm curious, what your R&D process looks like, where new product ideas come from, where do the adaptations come from previous generation products to new products? Like, how much influence do your customers actually have and how your lines kind of evolve over time?
Right. No, that's great. And the answer is more and more. Mm-hmm. Initially, obviously, we didn't have enough customer base to just really put it all out there and have these customers drive our product direction. But as the further we go down the line, the more they do. And so, of course, when, back in the old days when we were making product and trying to sell the bunch, back in my old, my old role when I was selling to dealers, you really, it drove you nuts when someone walk up and go, you know what you should do? You just sort of closed away and put your hand over your ears. And
you're like, no, I don't, away. But I bet you're going to have an idea.
Yeah, here we go. But I got to admit, that is honestly, my ears now perk up when someone says, you know what you should do? Even though 99 times out of 100, that idea is not executable. It may be a good idea, but it just can't be done. And many of them are not good ideas either. There is that gem in that 1 out of 100 that you say, wow, we really should do that. And as we start, so we listen all the time to our customers. For example, we just recently launched a compact, lightweight, packable spotting scope. And that was absolutely a customer outcry that, people are saying, no, I don't need a 65 millimeter like everybody else is doing. I want something that's ultimately packable. And so we listen to our customers have a ton of effect on the direction we're going. Now, we can't move at the speed that some companies can move for financial reasons, for logistics reasons, for inventory control reasons, for all kinds of different reasons. But we can't, I would say every product that's in our line right now, in our queue right now for development is customer generated, is from our customer base supported. And we typically bring now, we have some customers that we've been dealing with enough that we'll bring a team in and true up that idea. Like our new rifle scope, we have a rifle scope coming out at the end of this year. It's a long range hunting scope that came. It's an obvious extension of our line to have a long range scope.
Right.
But how we really built those details was talking to a lot of customers and then bringing a group of 5 of them together for a weekend to shoot a bunch and talk a bunch about what would make the perfect, what would make the right scope.
Right. Speaking of products and scopes, I want to shift gears here, and I want to talk about specs in the products.
You have a lot of gears.
I do have a lot of gears, man. It's
he's on a 10 speed.
Yeah. I'm not one of those trendy fixed gear guys. I roll an old school 10 speed.
Yeah, this is not not 3 on the tree here. You're rolling big.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's how we do it. That's how we do it. I borrowed John's spandex bike shorts for this podcast in case anyone was wondering.
Bet you did. I can't speak to that. I can't even. I'm having a hard time. We got to move on because I'm starting to visualize.
Yeah. We'll move quickly here. But I do want to talk about products, and a lot of times for me, this section of the podcast is a little bit selfish. Not going to lie, going to be fully transparent, because I don't know a lot about glass, and I'm kind of, the last time I went out west to hunt, I was hunting with a buddy of mine, and he was like, I was of course looking at different gear, and he was like, hey, don't bother getting a spotting scope. He's like, I have one. He's like, we'll glass together, and you'll be fine. And I was like, okay, cool. So I ended up, I did get a pair of binos, but like until that point, I had never even used a pair of binos to hunt whitetails. Like never took a set of binos into the timber.
Right.
It was just I didn't grow up using them.
Right.
I'd never really thought about it until I started taking them. And I actually didn't even take them because I thought I would need them. I was like, everyone else takes them. I should probably just check it out and see what the deal is. And so I started taking them, and now they have a place in my gear. But the other part is that, I'm getting ready to do a Western hunt, not this fall, but next with my dad in Colorado. And he and I are going together just solo, or not solo, but just he and I, nobody else. And so, he doesn't have any, glass for glass and, long distances and stuff like that. So I was like, all right, I got to look into doing that. And then also it'll help me with my summer glassing of fields for whitetails during the summer. So this is really a selfish section, so I can learn more about glass as I'm thinking about, making some purchases here. So first thing I want to understand, and I think, folks out there listening probably would like to understand, is what separates great optics from mediocre optics? Like, so color, clarity, all the, light aberration, whatever the case might be. Like, what are those deciding factors, and how can you tell you have good glass versus okay glass?
It's tough. It really is. I wish it was a little more clear cut that everybody, I could just give you say, if you look for this number or this phrase or this, this specification, you're going to know exactly what you're getting. And the old mantra of get the best optics you can afford, or you get what you pay for. A lot of those things are really true. The testing of it, what makes good glass is the density of that glass, and where it's made, how much it costs to make, which of course is reflected in how much it costs to purchase, really are the best measurements that we've seen to knowing, being able to test a pair of glass. Now, obviously, the tried and true is to look through it, to get it in your hand and to look through that. There are quality glass comes from one of two areas of the world. It comes from Europe and it comes from Japan. And now that doesn't mean that automatically you get a Japanese optic system or a German optic system that is going to be high quality, because there's a variety in all of those locations. But that is a good sniff test, kind of first sniff test. The price of the optic, I mean that's a little obvious, but the problem with that, as John was talking about, is once you break out of a direct sale model, there's a large difference between what it costs to manufacture that product and what you're paying for it, depending on where you purchased it.
Right.
So you can look for some key elements. You can look for terminology like ED, extra low light dispersion glass. A lot of companies call it HD, high density glass. It doesn't, again, it's a good indicator, but there's no requirement. If you call something HD, it can be whatever the heck that you want it to be. There's no legal requirement. There is a legal requirement on country of origin within this country, within the U.S.
Right.
So if you can look at where it's made, you're going to know a little bit more about the product. Okay. But the best case is to look through it. And I know that's not an easy answer. That's a tough answer. But and that's why you talked about transparency. There's a lot of information out on the internet that you can tell. I recommend finding a reviewer that you really trust and look into them and then try them out.
Right. And that's where I think you guys start to differentiate yourselves just right then and there, which is the demo program that you guys have. Right. I mean, it's
absolutely,
you're not going to be able to go into Cabela's and pick up like an expensive pair of binos and say, hey, mind if I take these out and scout with these for a week?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're going to look at you.
Take them for a week.
Yeah. They're going to be like, are you high? But,
but you can take a pair of demos of our demos, get them, then take them into Cabela's and try them side by side with the Swarovskis or whatever you're looking at in the store. Right. We love when that happens.
Yeah.
And honestly, I hear about it from a lot of store employees. I've sold to more store employees because other people have brought our optics into the store.
That's awesome. That's pretty funny. What so what are, a person going out and looking to pick up some binos or a spotting scope or whatever the case might be from a consumer perspective, right? Like, so say Mike, doesn't work for Maven and you're going to go look to get some glass, right? What features should you be thinking about, or would you be thinking about when you're choosing optics? Like, what are the main features you would kind of like zone in on checking out?
Sure. So the first thing for me for an optic is deciding on which optic you want. And so for me, I mean, and maybe I'm getting ahead of what you're talking about, but I want to know what's most important. Is use it. What kind of distances am I looking at? Am I using this in low light situations? How big a deal is to carry an optic around? Do I really want to focus it on it being lightweight and compact? Like, am I archery hunting? Am I doing a lot of spot stock, or am I spotting out of a vehicle? Is it a combination? Is there a compromise I need to think about? And so I kind of look at all of those things, and I think you need to weigh those things out as you're looking at an optic.
Right.
There's a little bit of personal preference in optics. It really would be nice if there was sort of a one-stop answer that you can say, oh, the whitetail optic you want is this.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm elk hunting in Arizona, it's this. I'm elk hunting in Colorado, it's this. But there's a little bit of personal preference in there that really comes down to which is more important to you. A field of view where you want to see as much as you can see because you're trying to find an animal, or magnification, where I really want to pull apart and dissect this area that I'm looking at, that, and see as maximize the amount of details that I'm seeing within that area. And that I have found more than anything, that little dichotomy, that little shift of which is more important. Am I looking for something, or am I really looking at something, at the details? That is the split of personality of optics. Right. That's the difference of whether you use an 8x42 or a 10x42.
Right.
Whether you really want a 15x56, or there's no way you would ever use that in a real world situation.
Right.
I land on the end of I'm trying to find something. And so I've always been a low power fan.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the hunters that we talk to, the majority of the hunters we sell to, the majority of the hunters in the U.S. are at least think that they want power.
Mm-hmm.
The magnification, detail is the number one most important thing to them. And that's why the 10x42 is the number one most popular optic in the nation.
Wow. That's interesting.
Honestly, it's a compromise. It's not a 12 power. It's not a 15 power. It's a reasonable optic. You can hold it still with your hand.
Mm-hmm.
It lets a good amount of light in. It has a good field of view. It's the Ford F-150 of binoculars. Like, it'll do. Yeah, you won't want to haul your fifth wheel around with it, but if you really want to tow a trailer, you can.
Right.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can hold a load of wood, but you may be. It's a workhorse.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And you were kind of foreshadowing a little bit the next section, or the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was I wanted to kind of I wanted to go through and kind of like do contextually, talk about your products in context of use case, so we can so people can just get a sense of like the line that you guys have and what they kind of apply to, and we'll use kind of John and I as our analogs here as far as like our hunting style and where we hunt and so forth. So, if John or I were doing a Western hunt and going out, to hunt elk, mule deer, John likes to hunt pronghorn. What product and features, I guess let me ask it this way. What products do you guys have that you would probably recommend, knowing that would be the type of hunting we would do? And like, what are the features that are most important to those products?
Right. So again, I would say if for Western hunting and for Eastern hunting, but the light gathering for any hunting, light gathering is critical. And so, I think I think you would both agree with me that light gathering is, so low light use, like, in low light hours use, is more important than being compact and lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
And let me back up one step. So first of all, I don't know how many of your listeners really know what the numbers on a binocular mean, because I am blown away every time I go to talk to anybody. People who've been hunting for 30 years, 40 years, don't know what the 10x42 means.
Yeah, I mean, color me guilty. I got 10x42s because I was like, hey, it seems like everyone else uses the 10x42s, so it must work across a broad spectrum of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a 3 to 9x40. It's a whatever. What does that mean? And we have found that the majority of customers out there don't know what that means. So it's fairly simple, but it's not. It's worth talking about. So the first number, the 10 or the 8 or the 12, whatever it is, but on the 10x40, the 10, that is the magnification. So a 10 power binocular makes things look 10 times bigger or 10 times closer.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty easy math. Something at 100 yards looks like it's 10 yards away.
Right.
When you're looking through that binocular. And so that's the first number. That's probably the most important number. The second number is a little bit more complex because it's the diameter in millimeters of the objective lens, the lens that goes towards the object, not the one you put against your eyeball, but the other one. And what that drives is two things. It drives the size of the binocular. So a 10 by 30 is a lot smaller than a 10 by 56 because the overall optic system has to change. So a 10 by 42 is kind of right in the middle of that. And then the second thing it drives is the amount of light it gathers in. The bigger that lens, it's like your pupil dilating. The bigger that lens, the more light that comes into the binocular. What it doesn't drive 100% is the field of view or how wide of an angle you're going to see. People often think that diameter of that lens drives that. And it's honestly, it's strange, but it doesn't. But it does drive the amount of light you want to gather. So my point to that is, for a hunting optic, something in the 40 millimeter range is really a good, reasonable place to start for a hunting optic. So you're bringing in, you're gathering a reasonable amount of light in a low light situation.
Okay.
If you are an archery hunter that is really worried about weight, or maybe you're a pronghorn hunter and you're just not out that early in the day. I hunt a lot of pronghorn. I don't usually hunt until the sun's up. Then I think you're a little happier with a compact optic. But for an overall hunting optic, honestly, I don't care if you're in the West or in the East, you want to gather light. That's the reason you brought a binocular. And so it's worth getting something in the 40 millimeter range, 42, 40, 45, something in that range.
Right. And so
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say for a spotting scope, what I guess give me an example of the I guess the variety that you guys have available for a spotting scope.
Well, I'll talk about the variety of a market because the market is actually a little wider than what we have available. Because the same thing happens in a spotting scope. The bigger that lens, the more light you're going to gather. That's even more important when you get into high power. So we make an 80 millimeter scope, and now we have a 56 millimeter scope. It's pretty common to have a 65 millimeter scope, and sometimes there's bigger ones like your 90 or 100 millimeters. So the bigger that lens, the larger that scope's going to be, and it gets really big. Our 80 millimeter scope weighs about 4 pounds. It's a heavy to do, but you have to the diameter of that lens really drives how successful you can be at a higher power.
Right.
And even an 80 millimeter lens, if you stretch it beyond a 50 times magnification, you really can't bring in enough light to get good clarity.
Right.
So if you're going to get up to 60 or 65 power, which we don't do, but if other companies do, you really should be using a 100 millimeter lens or a 90 millimeter lens. In order to otherwise your clarity is lost.
Right.
Your resolution, you just can't see a clear image at a long distance.
Right.
So
go ahead.
The personality driven. So I think people, all joking aside about an 8x42, we give a lot of people crap about that being the most popular. It is a fantastic all-around configuration. It's a good compromise of somebody who's that's going to spend a lot of time looking at 50 or 60 yards and is going to spend a lot of time looking at 800 or 1,000 yards. If you spend the majority of your time looking under 500 yards, my recommendation would be to go with a lower power. Go with a 7, 8, or 9. Stay low. You're going to get a better field of view. You're going to get better clarity and more light transmission because you have a larger field of view. You're bringing in more light. You're you've got more options that way. If you're spending the majority of your time looking 500 yards or more, go with a higher power optic. Don't compromise.
Right. So
if you're going back and forth, then pick a horse, and you're going to be okay.
Right. So it sounds like I chose wisely because I was using mine for out west, and then of course I'm using it a lot for whitetail, which is that, if I'm glassing, it might be 300 yards away from my truck to the middle of a bean field somewhere, or it's 50 yards through brush and timber that I'm looking.
Right.
So it sounds like I chose wisely. So let me ask this: say for example, there's a guy who's just hunting whitetails and he hunts in really thick kind of areas. Doesn't go out west. What Maven bino would be the one you'd put him on? Would it be that like 7-ish power, bino that you would be thinking about?
Yep. I would do a 7 or an 8, depending on which configuration you're doing. Honestly, so I assume this guy's, primarily, I would ask whether he's a spot and stalk hunter or if he's a tree stand hunter.
Right.
If he's a tree stand hunter, I would go with an 8x42. Or a 7 or 9x45. I would go with a slightly larger optic because you don't have to carry it around. It's great, and you're really going to be able to bring in some light, pick apart what you're looking at.
Right.
If you're a spot and stalk, if you're looking at you're just walking through super dense foliage, I would go with a compact. I'd go with a 6 or an 8x30.
Right.
Because you're fighting. If you're getting through that kind of dense, now that's rare. But,
right.
Obviously that's where I would go.
Right.
The only difference I would say is, and I talked to a lot of these whitetail hunters, is the guys that's I just don't like to bring binoculars because they're too heavy. But they do whatever you can to bring a pair of binoculars because you will not regret it.
Right.
And in that case, getting a compact might be okay.
Right.
Because at least you'll bring it along.
Yeah, that's kind of where that's kind of where I was at, where I was not taking anything. And then once I started, it was kind of like, and it was always for weight reason. I was always like, I don't really want to carry these. Like I'm going to carry these and I'm not even going to use them, but it ended up, they make a big difference. But John, do you have any, I mean, I feel educated finally. Like I feel like I know a little bit about optics. So when I make my choices here in the not so distant future, I'll know what the hell I'm looking at and what I'm talking about. But, you have any additional questions there, John?
Well, I mean, just I'd say kind of an unbiased person that doesn't own Maven, but I've been running them for the last couple of years. On the whitetail side, that C series is unbelievable how much you get on that C series. Like extremely affordable, very, very quality glass. From a whitetail perspective, I would recommend, if a guy's, working on a budget a little bit, but wants a good quality piece, the C1, the C1 or the C2 are phenomenal. You can get those, like the C1 you can get in an 8x42. The C2, I believe that's a 7x28. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
So those are two very affordable pieces. I mean, that C2 starts at $200 and the C1 starts at $325. And, not going to bash any competitors of Maven, but I have had people that have compared the C series to some $400 and $500 competitors. And everybody has told me this is better glass than what I just paid, so. And it kind of it goes back to that bang for the buck. I mean, when people are shopping for products, remember the golden rule in the outdoor industry, and you kind of know how much skin in the game that other player has under some of those different business models. And, the previous model that I gave, those examples with the numbers, that kind of starts making sense why that $300 bino is better than the competitor's $500 bino. And that's just, that's from personal experience, from what I've heard from people. I was with a competitor of Maven's for a lot of years. And, I made the switch based on quality. And Mike will tell you straight up, I'm not a paid person from Maven. So, I'm speaking from from I wanted quality glass and wasn't a paid spokesperson. And I found it. Now I also have the B series 10 by 42s. Those things were so awesome out west. A little bit more magnification, glassing, 100, 200, 300, 400 yards and that kind of stuff. And that came into play. Tree stand hunting, whitetail hunting, 8 by 42s, and you're solid.
Yeah. What glass, John, which set of Mavens did you give me while we were out shed hunting? Or while I was out visiting you?
I had my B series in my bino harness, and then you were carrying the C1s.
Nice. Yeah, they were sweet. I mean, I liked them better than the ones that I have at my house, so I was a little bummed to give them up. Not gonna lie. I was trying to figure.
John, I'm glad you brought up the C's and the B's, and because I was talking much more generically before and didn't get really into the detail between the two, but we were psyched to launch that C series. We were a little nervous because you always want to have your 100% best foot forward, but the C series really have been killing it. They are awesome, and you're absolutely right that when you talk about a workhorse, a value of a item, of a product, those C series, we're really psyched with how they compare out there.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing too. Like I get it. Our backgrounds are similar on launching products, and I'm still a product designer for some other companies. And you launch a product, and let's just say you have you're launching a premium product. I mean, the B1s, those are $900 binos. And then you launch a product that's $300, and you're like, okay, are people going to think that this was kind of an afterthought? So I get it. But I can tell you straight up, it is quality glass. And, you see some companies do this where they launch a price point item, and it kind of helps bridge the gap. I only see it as the C1 actually helps you sell your other binos as well. Because, people, when they want to go out west and they're like, you know what, I got to stick with Maven. I got to go to their next lineup or something. But it's a great quality piece. It's and I wouldn't call it an entry level piece because the quality's there, but the price is right. And yeah, they're phenomenal. I've traditionally what I do is I carry the B1s with me on a bino harness. The C1s always go with me in shed hunting parties if somebody doesn't have binos, or for me, I wanted to, get Clint on the Maven train. So I'm like, hey, you need to pack these. And so I had him using them, but they also stay in my truck a lot too, along with my spotter. And, I hit these gravel roads. Actually, last night I went out with my Maven spotter and was doing some of my mobile glassing from my truck. Starting to spot some velvet bucks, here in Iowa. So before the corn gets too tall and you can't see them as well, it makes it kind of nice. But and that's the thing too. Like I was staring through the spotter last night, and it was dark, like it was dark, and I'm still crystal clear seeing bucks out there, and it was so hot I knew they wouldn't come out till late last night. But yeah, once I took my eye out of the spotter and I looked around and I'm like, okay, people are going to think I'm crazy. Yeah, exactly. Like people are going to think I'm like, what is this guy doing? It's dark outside and he's looking through a telescope, He must be looking at stars.
Yeah, exactly. But he's a hippie. He's looking at stars.
He's a hippie. Yeah. So no, it's, and that's why, you were talking about the different, the different specs, whether it be on the eye side or what I call the scope side, or, the glass side. And I wanted to kind of paint that picture for people just so when they're on the website, when they're on the Maven site and you're looking at the different series, Maven does a phenomenal job of breaking everything down as far as the specs. You kind of see what you're going at. And then once you make your decision on what is going to work the best for you, then you can go over to the shop page and then it's got everything listed out and you can start going from there. But super clean, and it's a smooth process.
Thanks. Yeah, we definitely work to try to make it that way, and always are trying to improve. One of the differences, of course, with the C series between ours is the bees allow that customization. Those are really built one by one by one. It really, that bee, the quality of making that. That's why the bee is just a binocular, like binocular number 1, binocular number 2. The C series are more mass produced. There's no customization available, but we focus on making, a solid workhorse of our product. All across the board, we backed everything with an unconditional lifetime warranty. So, optically, we're going to keep this thing running, functionally going to keep it running forever. It's a legacy product in our mind. It's something you'll pass down for generations. Nice. So it's transferable. It's backed 100%. But that's kind of one of the differentiations between the two.
Awesome. So first off, I got a thorough education on glass, so I want to say thanks for that. Sure. I'm continually more jealous of John's binos that he let me borrow while we were shed hunting. And I was hoping that they would make their way into my suitcase before I left Iowa, but they did not. Unfortunately, they stayed in his vehicle.
He's cautious about that.
Yeah. He didn't let me get too far away with them. I'll tell you that. I didn't get out of eyesight. But before we let you go, Mike, I want to give you a chance to kind of let people know where they can find out more about Maven, find out more about your products, and where they might be able to follow you and get information.
Yep. Well, I appreciate that. We are online, of course, at mavenbuilt.com. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at mavenbuilt. There's a million hashtags, but it's easy to find us on the internet. We are out there. We're not in any stores. We are never going to be in any stores. But you can find us on Amazon as well. We do have a storefront there because a lot of people just shop there. So we figured we'd extend that as well. But mavenbuilt.com is the best way to find good information.
Yep. I think that is the nugget of information out of this podcast is that people shop on Amazon. I think if people don't get anything else from
They do. It's the Google of shopping.
That's right.
And it's a weird world we live in.
I get a package a day, I think, from Amazon if I'm being completely honest. But
my wife gets a package a day. I get a package a month.
Right? Yeah. To be fair, the balance of mine at home might be about the same, but mine usually costs more. But John, before we get out of here,
that's fair. $1 to $1.
yeah, exactly. John, before we get going, do you have any last thoughts or anything you'd like to add before we get out of here?
Yeah. So for all the listeners, hopefully you're encouraged to go check out mavenbuilt.com. And once you decide on the binos or the spotter of choice or your swag, the gear, to get in behind the brand, be sure to use code mulligan-gift at checkout. You will receive a free gift with your purchase from Maven that'll come directly to you. Also, if you were in the area of Cambridge, Ohio, this year, August 2nd and 3rd at the Jurassic Classic, phenomenal trade show, outdoor. They call it a giveaway and outdoor expo. They do a phenomenal job of promoting the show. There's a ton of giveaways, a ton of raffles going on. It's just a general good time. I will be representing Maven at the Maven Optics booth those 2 days, be camping out there with a lot of other cool brands. Prime Archery, Exodus will be there. The fellas from Become One, and just a lot of good people that are going to be there at that show. So if you get a chance to swing by the Jurassic Classic, or if you've been there, it's an awesome show. This will be Maven's first year there, and I'll be there in the booth selling binos and spotters there on site right at the show.
And then you also get the pleasure of seeing one John Mulligan in person. So who could beat that?
Which is always a joy.
It's always a joy.
Worth the price of admission.
Yeah, and the first person that comes to, I'll tell you what, we're going to make this announcement right now. The first person that comes up to the Maven booth and refers to me as Maven, I'm going in halves with you on a pair of C1s.
There you go.
There you go.
Boom. Love it.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
John, the Maven Mulligan.
John, the Maven Mulligan.
What's the date of the Jurassic Classic again? What's the date?
It's August 2nd and 3rd.
Oh, first weekend in August. Okay.
Yeah, first weekend in August. And while I'm there, I'll be doing a ton of Instagram stories from my personal Instagram as well, making sure that we get some people there, and it should be a really good time. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm hoping I get to
a heck of a show.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can make it out. I've been wanting to make it out. I was talking to Chad and those guys about possibly coming out this year. So I just have to see what my calendar looks like and if I can break away from the homestead for a couple of days, because it looks like a blast. I hope I'm able to make it. If not, I hope you guys have a blast. Call John Maven. Get him to go halvesies with you on a pair of C1s. Mike, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. We're gonna have to have you back on again sometime to talk, maybe during hunting season. See how see if the elk have more bone this year since it's been wet. But I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Mike for joining us, and would like to also thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before we shut this thing down, I do need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Obsession Bows, Ramcap Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.